And good morning, everybody. Welcome to Chalk Talk. I have a feeling we may have an audio issue, and let me just double check. I am your host, Kim Davis, and welcome to Chalk Talk. Let me see. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3. All right. I did not hear that last um, that intro video, but at any rate, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am super excited as always to be with you guys today. Today is Tuesday, December the 15th. And so let me say a happy, happy birthday to my cousin, Gabriel Briscoe in Dallas, up there hanging out with those Cowboys, probably avoiding me just because they're not doing so great. I don't know why, right? The team I cover is not doing great either. But at any rate, happy birthday, cuz. I will be reaching out and talking to you a little bit later. But we are winding down um, this final month of 2020, right? Let me see here. Let's do this. I can move that graphic out of my face. As we wind down 2020, there's just some things I want to remind you guys. And first and foremost, before we start talking about some of the sports of the week and news of the week, I want to remind you about wearing your mask, right? Super. I don't know if you guys are excited about the vaccine. I am, and what it represents and what it could mean for just the health and wellness of the country and the world. It'll be a while before many of us can take it, but that it is available. People are starting to take it. Good morning, Charles Lamar Drayden. Always good to have you in the room. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, so that was good news, right? That was really good progress. And I'm going to let you hear from a doctor who was on another show, the Karen Hunter show. And I listen to that show when I can. And I missed the actual interview because I wasn't listening to the show that day. But I heard her talk about this doctor who came on the show. And I'm going to play a clip of it here. And I'm going to put the link in the comments so you guys can go and listen to the whole thing, who talked about why she is supporting her thoughts about the where is my here it is, her thoughts about the vaccine. She was a part of the trial, and she's African American. She's a physician, and I think it's important for us to hear from voices that from people who look like us and who work in the space, not just a physician, but work in this space of disease and infectious disease, and can talk to us about why the science matters. And the clip that I'm going to play for you guys is her talking about why um, it's her talking about why it answers a question about the speed, if you will. So, I just did something. Let me do that. Take that out. Okay. I want to make sure that you guys can hear this. So hold on, you cannot because I cannot. So hang on 1 second. I need to change a setting. It's kind of like live TV. Don't you just love it? Let me connect these.
Let me walk for breaking that down because it really, at least even in my own mind, clarified some misconceptions that I actually had. And I think your example about sub-Saharan African regions and that being an environmental adaptation as opposed to a biochemical or biophysical whatever sort of difference, that I think that means a lot, and it certainly clarifies a lot for me. I'm curious
Let me walk.
And I think your example about sub-Saharan African regions and that being an environmental adaptation as opposed to a biochemical or biophysical.
Test, test, test. Okay, I think we may be able to now see if I can hear this. All right, we're going to try it again. Is the sound back now, Charles? Is my sound back? Let's see if I can do it this way. Conceptions that I actually had, and I think your example about sub-Saharan African regions and that being an environmental adaptation as opposed
to a bio.
So, Doctor, thank you so much for breaking that down, because it really, at least even in my own mind, clarified some misconceptions that I actually had. And I think your example about sub-Saharan African regions and that being an environmental adaptation as opposed to a biochemical or biophysical, whatever, sort of difference. I think that means a lot. And it certainly clarifies a lot for me. I'm curious about the time frame for the vaccine trial. I literally, I just glanced down at my phone, and one of my good girlfriends had sent me a screenshot of Governor Cuomo's proclamation that we should not allow the Black and Brown communities that were most devastated by this virus to be the last in line. They should be the first. We should employ the churches. We should employ community-based groups. And she was like, are they trying to get us? Like, she's literally trying to figure out, like, why now are you trying to center Black people when you have decentered Black people, virtually the entire time you've been in office? That's my comment, not yours. My question for you is, what is the typical length of time for a vaccine trial, and how does the length of time that this particular vaccine has been
tested, how does that compare to what we would normally see if we weren't dealing with the pressures of a worldwide pandemic and the need for a rush time frame?
So that's a very important question, and I'm glad that you asked it. So typically you could see vaccine development happening across 7 to 10 years, right? So that could be a standard. There's variation among that. Even some vaccines can be were developed as soon as 4 years. What we're looking at, let's start it by saying 2 different factors that allow these particular trials to be developed at a quicker pace. One, the federal government put money into the vaccine trial process. The federal government infused $9.5 billion, which removed financial disincentives for drug makers not to have the most efficient process. So for instance, you would work on testing, you would get to the candidate that was the safest and the most effective, and however long that took, that would be a process that was exhausted. Then in a sequential fashion, you would begin to work on manufacturing. Because the federal government infused dollars, it allowed drug makers to already start working on the manufacturing process while still working on the testing process, because there would be no financial risk if the vaccine didn't work. Okay, so if you don't have that financial protection, you're not going to start to consider how do you manufacture the vaccine and how do you get multiple doses and distribute it out to people if you don't know it works. But when the federal government put money in, it gave companies that shield. It gave companies that economic shield, that fiscal shield to say, okay, I can put my hands in both pots at the same time, right? So the science was allowed to happen in parallel instead of happening sequentially. That's one thing. Two, we're using a different technology in these two particular vaccine trials. In Moderna and Pfizer, Pfizer is joined with a German company, BioNTech. In both of those trials, you're using what's called messenger RNA technologies. This technology has been around for about 4 decades. It was mainly used in medical research. It had not been borne out to bring a drug to market or to bring a vaccine.
So it's not like this science was totally new or unknown. It just hadn't progressed to this point that it could be proven to be so effective. So it was an opportunity waiting to be happened. So you have the federal government infusing dollars, making the process a parallel instead of sequential, which rapidly shortened the process, because otherwise people would take years to think about how to distribute and manufacture something. And then you also have this technology that's poised to happen in a matter of days. Once the virus was sequenced, the genome of the virus was sequenced in China, in a matter of days, we were able to, in the US, to design a messenger RNA protein that could be injected in a fat soluble lipid. A cell could uptake it. It's not the virus. You're not getting infected with coronavirus. It's just a code for a viral protein. It can't infect you because you don't have all the parts assembled to infect you. But if I know the code to what that protein is, I can put it in your body. Your natural immune response will then see it, will recognize it, will begin to have helper T cells, killer T cells, antibiotics. So you have this robust immune response, so that when your body gets exposed, or if your body gets exposed to the full thing, not just the spike protein, it already is prepared and it already can defend itself against. That's what makes that technology fascinating. We did that in days. We come up with the codes in days.
All right, I just wanted to share that, and I'm going to put the link at the end of the show where you can watch the entire interview. But I thought that piece was really fascinating, because I know one of the questions that many of us have is, how is it possible that a vaccine could be brought to market so quickly? And obviously, especially in the African American community, we have reason to question medical professionals or medical research. And so I thought it was important to share that. And I want to say one other thing before, because I thought it was important to start with the vaccine, since that to me is like really the biggest news of the week. Even though the vaccine is becoming available, it won't be widely, available for everybody until probably second quarter of 2021, maybe by the summer. But it's important that we understand and that we're educated and we're knowledgeable about it. And so if you listen to people talk about the vaccine, I would encourage you to listen to scientists who work in the field, right? Because there are some scientists who've come out and said things, but that's not what they do. And so I think it's important to get information from people who can explain it in a way that it makes sense, and then you can make your decision. But I just wanted to share that. I also want to remind you, we still have to wear our masks. We still have to practice social distancing. I know it's the holidays, we want to move around. My birthday is Saturday, and I usually do something really, like bring people together, hang out for my birthday every year, but we're in a pandemic. And so I'm not doing that, right? I will doing the right things. And of course, if God says the same, then I'll have a birthday next year and then we'll do something really fun then. But other than maybe jumping on Zoom, going to my mom's house and having dinner, because those are the people I'm around, that's what I'm doing. And then of course, it's the holidays, it's Christmas, it's New Year's, or whatever you celebrate, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, all of those things, look forward to Kwanzaa every year. Not doing any of that in person, right? Because we are still in a pandemic. So I just want to encourage you to make smart choices and encourage your family and friends to do the same thing, so that in the future, I know we're tired of being at home. People are depressed. They are overwhelmed. If you know somebody, if you're worried about somebody who you think may be a little depressed or feeling isolated, call them, reach out to them, check on your people, check on your neighbors, and check on your senior citizens in your family, especially those who may live alone. So that's how I wanted to start today's show, with encouraging you to do that. So good news, there is healing on the way, but we still have a lot of work to do. So in the sports world, there is a lot happening, right? There's a lot happening around. I mean, unfortunately, there was a case of a young man in Florida, a college basketball player. I'm not going to show the video. I just think it's horrific watching it. Who just collapsed on the court. He is now in a critical but stable condition. His grandfather, I saw an interview. He is in a medically induced coma. He had COVID this summer. They haven't said yet if whatever happened to him, in this game over the weekend is because of him having COVID previously. But my point in saying that is the best thing you can do in terms of dealing with the virus is to not get it, because there's so much we don't know about it and its long-term effects. It doesn't mean that it is a death sentence, but it is killing a lot of people. We are over 300,000 people dead in the US. And unfortunately, there are people who still somehow think it's a hoax. So I'm encouraging you to not be one of those people, and to just make good choices and be smart, and also to send well wishes and say prayers for the young man in Florida. So that's happening. There's things happening. We probably know more about the process from once election day is over to the inauguration, that many of us may have not known before, about the seating of the electoral colleges, the certification, well, first the state certifying the votes, and then the electors actually certifying it and saying yes, committing to those votes. And then there's one more thing, it has to go through Congress. And then on the 20th of January, there will be an inauguration. But Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are officially the president and vice president-elect. End of story, full stop. That's what it is. And so that happened on yesterday. Another piece of history, which in the past, many of us who don't really follow politics like that, never thought about it, or really knew about it, because in the past it was really a formality. Well, what we know now is there are no real formalities or norms, and we're going to have some new procedures, policies, and laws, right? Because Trump will not be the last person to push the envelope. He has shown people who are probably smarter than him how to do this. And so we as a country have to do better and be better. So I wanted to also mention that. And now I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the world of sports. So here in Houston, the Houston Texans were blown out, really. Didn't look good against Chicago on Sunday against the Bears. In fact, I'm watching that game on my phone, of course, because I have DirecTV. That's another show. And they're in a fight with Tegna, Tegna, which is the CBS affiliate, is a Tegna station, so can't get it, right? So I'm watching it on my phone, and I'm going, these Bears look different. Like, they're making these Bears look like really, really good. You open a game with like this, 80-yard run, that just sits you back on your heels. Deshaun was on the run all day. Justin Reed got injured in the game. He's out with a hand injury for the rest of the season, something that he may even have to have surgery on in the off season. And they just didn't look great. Can't stop the run. Offensive line can't block me and you. I don't know. They're struggling in a lot of ways. And so Romeo Crennel did answer the question when he was asked about Deshaun Watson playing. Deshaun got his bell rung in the game on Sunday. So he went out and he felt it in his hand too. And because he was on the ground, you have to take a play off. You have to come off the field. And as soon as he was able, he went back. And many of us were saying, I know I was tweeting like, no, don't put him back, because the game was out of hand by that point. He had been taking quite a beating on Sunday. And I thought that perhaps he should stay out. Like, why risk it? But I get it. I mean, he's such a competitor. The game was not just out of hand. The game was really over at that point. And so Romeo Crennel addressed that he talked about it on yesterday about what do you do with the Sean who wants to play.
Oh, everybody had a gap responsibility.
Oh,
and if everybody had filled their gap, that would not have been.
Okay, let me come back to that because that's not the clip I wanted. I'll bring that back to you. But he talked about it. Yeah, they have a lot of challenges. So Charles says, this is interesting. He said, ask DirecTV about their franchise agreement with the city of Houston. Usually it requires carrying local stations. I will do that. In fact, on Sunday, I did tweet. I was like, I'm so frustrated. This fight with DirecTV and Tegna that Tegna are having is frustrating, and they need to figure it out. And so the DirecTV people tweeted me back and said, we understand, Kim, we understand your frustration. I was actually considering leaving DirecTV anyway, because I think their rates are just super, super crazy expensive. And none of those carriers have great customer service. And so this may be the thing though, that makes me have to change because I want the hassle of it, but I am going to check about that. Charles, thank you for that. Jonathan says racist organization, the front office has to change. Let's talk a little bit about the front office of this Houston Texans team. Cal McNair has come out and said that Jack Easterby, the guy that's currently over executive VP of operations, will not be the general manager. That he will not be the general manager moving forward. Jamie Roots, the team president, and he's been the team president since the inception of the organization, has said that Jack Easterby will not be the general manager, okay? Last week, there was a scathing article in Sports Illustrated about Jack Easterby and his role with the Houston Texans and alleged chaos around the organization and discontent in terms of working with him. And it talked about his ascension. I mean, you've heard me talk about it. Jack Easterby started as an intern, I want to say with the Jaguars, but I can't remember now. He worked in the Patriots organization because, of course, that makes you a superstar. He was a chaplain with the Patriots, and then he, moved up and became the let's work with your mind and make you feel better person. I don't know what that title was. And so then Bill O'Brien hired him in Houston to be the same kind of mind, get it together, we're happy coach or person. And then he moved over to become executive VP of operations after Brian Game was fired. That organization front office has just kind of been a mess. And so last week there was a Sports Illustrated article about Jack Easterby. And so I did a show on Channel 11 over the weekend, Sports Extra, with Jason Bristol, Dan Ortega, and Seth Payne from Sports Radio 610. And so we talked about the article and the role of Easterby, and Daniel made a good point. He said, why on earth would you keep someone that there's so much negative stuff about? If he's not, you've already said he's not going to be your guy, right? He's not going to be your guy. But as you're somebody thinking about coming here, you're probably wondering, like, well, what is the deal with the Jack Easterby guy? Like, what does he do? Like, what is his role? He's not going to be the GM, but what's he going to be? And am I going to have to keep him? I think it just does feel chaotic, And then we hear over the weekend, Adam Schefter, one of the NFL insider guys, reports that, Cal McNair has hired or is working with another consultant to help identify a head coach. And they mentioned Brian Schottenheimer, the OC from the Seahawks. And I was like, enough. Are we really going to recycle? Really? All these years. And now Brian Schottenheimer is ready? Come on. I mean, I'm just bothered by the people they surround themselves with, because it becomes a carousel of the same coaches, the same GMs, no new blood. And that's why there's not a lot of growth and not innovation in an organization like the Houston Texans, because they're not willing to go outside of what's comfortable and what they always do and what they always know. You know, Jonathan says Watson should be finished for the season. So I am not, on one hand, you go, oh yeah, he should. But on the other, I get it. I get why you don't want to just say you're done for the season. A game like Sunday, I thought he should not have gone back in. But I understand how, you know, you're young quarterback. You want to still, you know, as long as he's not getting, you know, obliterated behind the line like he was on Sunday, then I think you know, you've got to let him play. You know, I understand that. He wasn't GM when Gaines was fired. Who was the GM? So remember, Bill O'Brien wasn't technically the general manager. Like, he didn't have the title when Brian Gaines was fired. Brian Gaines was the general manager. Then he was fired, never to be heard from again. And then Bill O'Brien would always tell us that we're doing the whole, you know, GM by committee. Everybody's got input, but we knew that it was really him. He was making the decisions, and he was running the organization, the football side of the organization. So, and then was it last year? Was it this year? I can't even keep up. Was it the beginning of 2020 or the beginning of or was it 2020? The beginning of the year that Cal McNair came out and officially gave Bill O'Brien the title. Was it in 2019? I don't know, but he's basically been working in that role ever since. So yeah, it is kind of a dumpster fire over there. And so they've got some decisions to make, you know, and even though, you know, I heard some people kind of talking about Brian Gaines, or read them talking about Brian Gaines on Twitter yesterday, saying, well, even if he was here, there's some things that he would not have done in terms of personnel decisions, whether it was contract extensions of some players or whether it was obviously trades. And if he would have traded Clowney, he would have gotten more for him. So the SI article, Jonathan says, quoted, Easterby wanted Hopkins gone. Yeah, and so here's the thing with all of that. I mean, Easterby wanted him gone, and O'Brien wanted him gone, right? It was personal. And so I've long said that, you know, that's not how leadership looks, right? They've made bad personal decisions, bad personnel decisions, because they were personal decisions. So I meant that. I meant they made bad personal decisions. The Clowney decision was personal. And you could say, now, well, you know, Kim, he got hurt again. You know, maybe if he was here, he wouldn't have gotten hurt. But the deal was a bad deal. You know, the trade you made was bad. And then you also sent $7 million with him. That was a bad deal. You brought in Laremy Tunsil. And I'm going to go back a little bit. There was a guy named Dwayne Brown who's still playing at a really high level, who, if a personal decision hadn't been made a few years ago, you would have a solid left tackle. I don't know how many of you are real impressed with Laremy Tunsil. I am not one of them. You know, obviously he's got talent, he's a good player, but yeah, you know, I just, personal, right? The Dwayne Brown decision was personal, and Laremy Tunsil cost you a whole lot more. You gave up 2 number ones, and you brought in Kenny Stills, who then was released right before you found out that Will Fuller was going to be out because he'd been juicing. I mean, it's just been chaotic and crazy. And so Jack Easterby is a part of all of it because he's there. And he was in the room with Bill O'Brien. If you remember in the offseason, Bill O'Brien always talked about Jack Easterby, and that, you know, they did things together. I just think if you get rid of one, you got to get rid of both. Now, you know, who was SI's art source for that article? I don't know. Obviously somebody with a lot of knowledge about the organization. I don't even want to, you know, go down that rabbit hole too much, but at any rate, it's a mess. And I was really disappointed when I heard them say, I read that the Jeff guy, Jeff somebody, you know, how many people do you need on this committee, right? How many people do you need to figure out who the next head coach is going to be? And when I hear Brian Schottenheimer is the first name that comes out of his mouth, I'm like, well, we don't need that guy. He's the wrong consultant. I mean, you're talking to Andre Johnson. You met with Deshaun Watson, who said, I appreciate being consulted. Let me get through the season so I can sit down and really think about it. That's what he told us. He said, you've talked to any number of people. Well, maybe you should start with getting a general manager so that the general manager can be a part of hiring the coach so that they're on the same page. So you don't start the next administration, if you will, in chaos. I mean, it just doesn't seem like they're doing it the right way. But what do I know? No one's asking me. But I just would hate to see them continue in the vein that they have continued. So that's what I'm going to say. Yeah, Charles, should have traded Clowney. I remember that very well. And let's go back to Clowney, okay? It was a bad move when they did it. And it was because they were mad because he wanted more money. Like, I'm always amazed at that. He did what players do when they get the franchise tag put on them. You know, they held out. The first thing they did was he could have been franchised as either a defensive end or a linebacker. One of the position has a higher pay rate, which would have made him make a little more money. Not that that was a huge issue to him, but that was the first kind of petty thing. And I think it's the linebacker position. And so then whichever one it was that paid the higher number, they labeled him, they tagged him with the other. Okay, petty, you know, all right, we're gonna save a couple $1 million, whatever. Clowney was set to come back to camp, come in. He'd been working out, set to come in right before the Dallas Cowboys preseason game. And he's like, wants to trade him to the Dolphins. And Clowney says no, because Clowney had never signed his tender. He had never signed the tender, so you can't trade him until he signs it. And he wasn't going to sign it to go to a team that was a lottery team. He was like, no, I'm not going there, but here's where I will go, right? It was linebacker. Okay, thank you, Charles. I'll go to Seattle or Philadelphia. He mentioned about 2 or 3 teams. So Bill wasn't happy. He made the move, and you can't tell me it's business when you have to then send money with him too. So you paid half a salary? That was crazy. It was personal, and it was a bad personnel decision. That was Clowney. Dwayne Brown, we know that was personal. He didn't like the fact that he spoke out, but really, and Dwayne Brown wasn't trying to break the bank, right? He really wasn't. He wanted some of the next year of the money guaranteed. It would have been a whole lot cheaper if you kept Dwayne Brown than getting Laremy Tunsil. Okay, so then there's that deal. And there's even almost no point in revisiting the DeAndre Hopkins move. That was just bad. It was a bad deal because truth be told, you could have paid DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson. So let's not buy into they couldn't have done that. You could have made it work, but you didn't want to make it work because you had some personal issues with DeAndre Hopkins. And so you and Jack Easterby, try to be respectful because his other name keeps popping in my head, but Jack Easterby. So how do you become respected as an organization again in terms of around the league and a place that people want to come and play? And so who the general manager is really important because he's going to have to be almost like a magician, right? You have no draft picks, so you finish in, at the bottom of the division. Doesn't even help you in the draft because you don't have any picks. Like you don't have any early round picks, so that doesn't help you. But who is going to be the person navigating the draft and trying to do something with free agency, trying to get you some money under the cap? Are you going to have to divorce yourself from some recent contracts? What are you going to do? How are you going to navigate this space? A whole lot of questions, not really sure. But here's what I say. You've got Deshaun Watson, and that is your best selling card. So if somebody is thinking about coming to an organization, the first thing a coach wants to know is, who's the quarterback? Well, you got Deshaun Watson. You got one of the best in the game, and he is your best marketing piece to get somebody to come to this job, which otherwise may not look like a great job. But because you have Deshaun Watson, even though you're devoid of draft picks, even though you're right up against the cap, and all of that, even though you've got some recent contracts that are questionable, you've got Deshaun Watson. So you got a shot. Okay, that's the Houston Texans. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Houston Rockets before we get out of here today. They are 1-1 in the preseason. Not that the wins and losses in preseason really matter. They looked pretty good in the first game on Friday night. They played again on Sunday. What's today, Tuesday? On Sunday, they lost to Chicago, to the Bulls in Chicago. They play tonight They play the Spurs tonight, and James Harden is back at work. He was at practice, and let me tell you my thoughts about this whole James Harden thing. I am always on the side of player empowerment. I am. I'm always pulling for players. It's clear, it's been well documented that NBA players have a lot more leverage and a lot more power than NFL players. It's night and day, right? They're able to push the envelope, make some things happen. They've got guaranteed contracts. I mean, it's just a whole different ball game. They got a different CBA. They're just in a different position. And so when I look at James Harden, and I've covered him, I remember the day they signed him and the press conference. I was sitting right next to his mom when he came in from OKC back, 8 years ago. And since he's been here, they've made a lot of moves, and they've always talked to him about it. So let's not pretend that he just wants out because they've never done what he's wanted. That is categorically not the truth. It's just not. He wanted Dwight Howard. They were singing Kumbaya. It was going to be this great marriage of a doubted man in the middle, and then James Harden, and just imagine all the pick and rolls and the alley-oops. I mean, there was this excitement about that, and it didn't work out. Now, some people are like, Dwight Howard, you just didn't live up to what you expected. Maybe not. I know that in the postseason, he was a lot more dependable when he was here, if you go back to those games, in terms of what you got from him, than James Harden was. But I digress. They fell out. It didn't work. It was ugly. Because when it gets bad with James, it gets ugly. Okay. So it was so bad. And the organization, of course, chose James Harden. And they didn't treat Dwight great on the way out. I mean, I covered the team. I remember I was in the locker room. You could cut and see the tension that existed, right? And so Dwight goes away because he was a problem. Okay, then was it the next year or a year or two later, whatever, the next thing that happens is Kevin McHale. They start out the season with 111, something below 500, and they fired Kevin McHale. Don't think Harden was a big fan of Kevin McHale's, but at the time, Les Alexander, who was the owner, said, listen, I don't know if this is the right move, but I've got to do something. I could almost respect that. He's like, I got to do something. And so the easiest thing to do is fire the coach, right? Because he's one guy, and then the rest of them, it's a whole lot of guys. So they got rid of Kevin McHale. BJ Bickerstaff was the interim coach, and then next year they hired Mike D'Antoni. Mike D'Antoni came in with the kind of offense that let James basically do what he wants, flourish. I mean, and listen, we know James is talented. He is a prolific scorer. There's a lot of things about what he can do on the floor that other players can't do. He's got a level of talent that you just really cannot deny. So let me make sure that I'm clear about that. And I'm kind of fast forwarding through these steps because, in this 8 years that he's been here, but they have some success in terms of postseason. They pushed the Warriors. The Warriors were dominant. I don't know who would have beaten the Warriors in the years when the Warriors were so good before Kevin Durant. And then once they got Kevin Durant and he was healthy, they were really, they were the team. And so it was really about chasing Golden State in the West. So they pushed them. They got close. They got to Western Conference Finals. And then they went out and got Chris Paul. They made it, did a signing trade, got Chris Paul and got rid of some, we got rid of Montrezl Harrell in that trade. Lou Williams back to the Clippers in that trade, Patrick Beverly. It was a number of people in that trade. And so they went and got Chris Paul. James wanted it. He was excited about it. Chris Paul, brought him into his State Farm commercials. They were singing Kumbaya. All was right with the world. James Harden gets MVP that year. I've been on record saying that I think a big reason of that, the growth in James Harden, because he's always had talent, was Chris Paul. I'm just saying. So first year, great. Second year, they don't make it. They fall, if they fall out at the end and it becomes me or him, right? So Chris Paul gets shipped to Oklahoma City. And the Rockets get Russell Westbrook, okay? So many people thought, well, so let me back up. When you thought about bringing in Chris Paul, the conversation was, well, they both handle the ball. How is that going to work? Chris Paul, he deferred to James. I mean, okay, right? Same thing with Russell Westbrook. Well, how is it going to be enough basketballs to go around? They're both very ball dominant. So, they have this great friendship. They're both from LA. They played in OKC together. They're boys. It's going to be good. They happy. They sitting on, there's just a love fest. And they lose in the second round of the playoffs in the bubble to the Lakers. They come back on the way home. Mike D'Antoni says, I'm out. I'm not even trying to get another contract. And I was not surprised, nor do I blame him. I don't think that Tillman and Daryl Morey handled him very well. But he worked through the season like a professional, because that's what you do. And then he told him, I'm out. Contract's up. I'm going to be a free agent. He is, of course, now an assistant coach with the Nets, working for Steve Nash, a guy he coached in Phoenix. So the Rockets go on this, I want to say exhaustive, because it took a while, quest to hire a coach. They ended up hiring Steven Silas, who had been with the Dallas Mavericks. Steven's got a lot of basketball history. His dad is Paul Silas, so he grew up in the game, and then he's had some significant jobs. He's not new at this. He's been paying his dues and learning for years. So he comes to Houston, his first head coaching position, and he's got 2 MVPs to work with, and then he doesn't, right? Then there's a report that Russell doesn't want to be here because of Tillman and his politics. I'm still not real sure if that's completely the case, but those are stories. I struggle, and you guys know that repeating stories that I don't really know when I don't ever hear the player really say it. And then there's James Harden that was like, oh, well, James and Russell don't want to be here because of Tillman Fertitta. If that was how Russell, that was one of Russell's reasons, I could buy Russell because of who he is and how he moves. I don't buy it with James Harden. I mean, he's a guy, remember, who showed up to the bubble wearing a Blue Lives Matter mask with a flag on it. So I don't necessarily think that, and then said, oh, I wasn't really aware what that meant. Yeah, he ain't the guy that's baked into the politics of the owner. I don't believe it. So Jonathan says, what is the real reason that Harden wants out? Well, first, what we were told, because he doesn't talk to any of us, not, locally, and definitely not to me. I mean, he was a little better in the bubble, in terms of not being so rude and dismissive. But it was, originally, supposedly he was the reason that they were trying to move Russell Westbrook. He didn't want to play with him anymore. So I'm confused. If you don't want Russell, if you don't want to be here, why do you care whether Russell is here or not? So that was kind of, I don't know, what that was. And these are all, like I say, we've never heard from him. I've never seen it. I keep hearing sources say. I saw over the weekend where ESPN said, well, their sources say that even though John Wall is there and he looks healthy and Boogie's there, he's not moved. He wants to be traded. So because he was on this Lil Baby Is My Dude tour, traipsing around the country, showering his rapper buddy with Honey Bun's $100,000 in cash and a $200,000 watch and a Prada gift bag, I don't really know. Like, he hasn't really talked to us. We've just heard it from sources say. I can't answer your question. His mother, I did see something where his mother got into some sort of I don't want to say spat, but kind of spat with somebody, some random person on Instagram. And she's like, my son deserves to get a ring and gives 210% and all this kind of stuff. So he wants to win now, right? Well, do you accept any responsibility for any of the things that have not gone well in the past year? That is my question, if I ever got to ask it. And now, of course, he's not talking to the media. And so that whatever that fine is, he can pay it. Now, what's going to be interesting is not only does he get fined, the team gets fined. So, I mean, I don't know how long Tillman's going to be wanting to pay this fine with this guy that don't want to be here. So, I don't really know the real reason. He feels like, in the teams that he picked, he said he wants to go to Brooklyn, which is where Kevin Durant is and Kyrie Irving is. Well, Kevin Durant kind of, when he came out, when they showed up in camp, and he basically said, the media is wrong. Y'all shouldn't even be reporting these stories, right? You shouldn't even be reporting this story. Okay, so because it's not really true. He never said, but if James came here, it'd be great, or I'd love to play with him again. I never heard him say that. In a separate interview, when he was asked about like the best player he played with, or the most, maybe not best, I don't want to say that, but toughest, most tenacious, whatever that is, when he was in OKC, he said Russell Westbrook was a guy that would just lay it out on the floor, give it all, right? And I don't remember the word that was used, so I don't want to say the best player, most tenacious, or I don't know which it was, but it was a compliment. But the person he said was Russell Westbrook. So James wants to go to Brooklyn allegedly. Okay, so what's in Brooklyn? Not only is it Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, it's also Mike D'Antoni as assistant coach, and the thought that probably is a system where he could go in and still do what he does. Why would Brooklyn do that? Right? They got to the bubble without even having a healthy Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving. Wouldn't you want to see, if you're Brooklyn, how these two superstars work together, what kind of team you have with them together? I just don't even see that as being possible. They're not going to trade Kyrie. So who are you going to get? Okay, so that wasn't the answer. That's not working out so well. And the other team you mentioned is Philadelphia. Well, the 76ers. Well, who's in Philadelphia? Daryl Morey, the Rockets' former general manager. He's a GM with the 76ers. The 76ers have been very clear. They're not trying to move Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid. So who are you going to get? So it's not so much just about what he wants. It's got to work. And it has to work for the Rockets because quite frankly, unlike what happened with Anthony Davis in New Orleans a couple of years ago, he's got 2 years left on his deal. He's got this year and another year, and then he's got a third year for a player option at $47 million for everybody who thought he was doing something big by saying he wasn't going to take the 50. He had $47 million in his final year of this deal. You don't think he's going to be at 50 if he's still healthy and playing? So, and if you're making $42 million, which is about where he is now, $50 million is no money. I mean, when you take out the taxes, that's not, if you're making 25 and they offer you 50 and you walk away from that, now you can say, well, maybe he's, so I just want us to keep things in perspective. So he wants to win, so he is in camp. He had to get 6 negative COVID tests, and he will play tonight. Let me just say this about Stephen Silas, Rockets head coach Stephen Silas, who has handled this beautifully, right? He's a professional. You come in as your first head coaching job, and then you got all this drama, right? And every day people ask him some of the same questions about James Harden, and he doesn't say, stop asking me, I'm tired. He doesn't give attitude. He just tells you what he can. He says, I can't answer it. I don't know. I don't have a timetable when he didn't have a timetable. I'm not really sure. I'm going to work with the players who are here. And so then he's back. He was at practice yesterday, he being James Harden. And so the questions were, well, what would he? Yes, he was there. We talked. He said, did you have a conversation? We did have a conversation about basketball, and I'm going to leave it at that. I don't really know what people expect him to say. Like, you know what I mean? And let me just say this, and I'm not questioning my colleagues. We just have different styles. I don't think it makes you a great journalist because you ask the same question over and over again, right? I just, he can't really tell you anything about James Harden. He didn't know. And in terms of the deal and James's commitment, I'm sure they're not talking about contract. I mean, he and James aren't boys. I mean, he's got this prima donna superstar who says he doesn't want to be here. And so if your goal is I want to win, you're not even interested to see that what this combination that is the here and now, John Wall, Boogie Cousins, if they're healthy, what it looks like. You're not interested because the other moves they made were moves you wanted them to make. And now you're saying, yeah, it hadn't worked. I want to go someplace where they're committed to winning. Oh, he's added a couple teams to his, apparently, sources say, again, I haven't seen him directly quoted as saying this, but sources say he's added to his list Milwaukee and Miami. So there are 4 teams that he's considering. But let me also remind you guys of this. James Harden does not have a no trade clause in his contract. So he don't really get to pick where he goes. But the Rockets are trying to get the biggest bang for their buck, right? You know, they want to make sure they get draft picks and a player who can come in and play right now. That's what they want to do. And I think all along, my thought was James comes in, see how what they're doing works. And if it's not working and you guys aren't going to be in the hunt as it gets you start getting close to the trade deadline, then you think about moving him. But why would you do anything before that? That's just not good business, right? It's just not good business. Bring yourself to work, which he's at work now. I think he loves the game. I think he would not want to sit out and not play. I also think he would not want to sit out and miss almost $42 million guaranteed money. And I do think he's more of a competitor than that. I'm not big, I question his leadership because I don't think that's not how leadership looks. But we'll see. They play tonight. It's preseason. I mean, today is the 15th. The regular season starts a week from today. The Rockets' first regular season game is the 23rd. So it's time to get it together, right? And you're right, Charles. Chris Paul was a real deal. He was the real deal. And I'm going to say this. I don't think James Harden is MVP that year if Chris Paul's not here. Yep, I said it. You can at me. I just don't. I think he brought that much out in him. And they miss him. Harden didn't start in Oklahoma. He did not. He was the sixth man, and Russell started. He came off the bench and couldn't really get the kind of deal he wanted. And so Daryl Morey was able to swing this deal and get him to the Rockets. He became really who he is in terms of seeing, him growing into this role of this just prolific offensive talent here in Houston with the Rockets. And so his unprofessionalism is just kind of annoying. Hello, my sister. Of course, she likes the great color lipstick. Why, thank you. I'm glad you approve. Okay, I guess it's a good color because so does Carol Justice. None of the guys told me that, but thank you, ladies. I appreciate that. So it is a quandary. There was a podcast with Steven Jackson who kind of ripped Harden recently. If you want to go back and check that out, he just said, Harden needs to come to work. He's being unprofessional. And he said, you're running around chasing a rapper and you got this new coach, this black head coach. You know how difficult it is for us to get these positions. And instead of you coming in and being a part of a team and helping him win, helping him build something here, you running around with a little baby. And can anybody help me understand that? I don't follow a little baby. So the whole, Prada bag, duffel bag with honey buns in it. And I've been told by some young people that are way more hip than me, the honey buns means 100 buns, like 100, and the bun is 1,000, so 100. So he gave him $100,000 in cash. So how does that work? Like, you go to the bank with your Prada bag and say, I want to withdraw $100,000 in cash, and then you get it in the small bills. I mean, what does that look like? Does anybody know? If y'all can help me with that, And listen, if any of you think that much of me and you want to give me $100,000, any $1,000, it don't have to be cash. I don't eat honey buns, and you don't even have to give me a Prada bag. I can get my own, okay? And he also gave him a $200,000 watch and went to his parties in Atlanta and in Vegas. But you want to be a champion. Championship mindset. That's not what it looks like. It's not. It's the season. It's the season. It's the season. The season is here. And this is what you do? I'm not sure about that whole he gives 210%. I'm not really sure. So, right. He did. He helped them get to the MVP level. That was a direct impact of the Chris Paul tenure as a Houston Rocket. And I just thought, he kind of got a raw deal, but James Harden is who he is. And, I'm not going to say, well, no one's going to want to bring him in because he's not acted real professionally. He's so talented. People are going to want to try, right? People are going to want to try and see because he's super talented. But I'm just not convinced unless, he was, I thought he was growing up, stepping into more of a leadership role. And then this offseason, I thought, here we go. We reverted back. So at any rate, look, that's what I got for you, right, on the Rockets and on the Texans. The Texans front office is kind of a mess. We will need to see what they are going to do in terms of who's going to lead that organization. And perhaps they won't keep getting, if you want to add somebody else to the consultant team, call me, because everybody else seems to be on it. But you need to figure out who your general manager is. And I'm going to throw out a couple of names that I've thrown out before. Alonzo Highsmith, who's definitely qualified. He's been an assistant GM. He's, worked in college football, going back to his alma mater and run that department, knows the game, has worked as an assistant GM and a personnel guy and is ready. There's Alonzo Highsmith. There's Louis Riddick, who I always like. There's a guy, Malik Boyd, who's the director of pro personnel with the Bills. He spent many of his, prior to going to Buffalo, he spent many years with the Cardinals. He's from Houston. Not that necessarily matters, but just FYI. Those are just some names I like. And they do all happen to be African-American men. But I think you gotta get a GM first. And then work with that GM and figure out who the coach is going to be so that they can be on the same page. So you don't start this next season, this next step in building your administration, your organization with chaos because there's a disconnect with the general manager and the coach because the general manager should be involved in the coaching hire. So you guys are so funny. Charles said, thank you. I'm going to have to, who knew, right? Hey, Carolyn, thank you. I appreciate it. Highsmith is a solid guy. He is a solid guy. I like him a lot. And let me see if I can show you this Stephen. I'm going to let you hear from, before we get out of here real quick, from Steve Silas. Let's see here.
Hey, Coach, could you give us an update on James Harden and PJ Tucker?
They were both in practice today and participated and were very good. It's good to have them there. Good to have their spirit here. It's good to have their veteran savvy, their smarts, their ability, so many different things that it was good to have. But yeah, they're both here and they were apart.
Cody Davis.
Hey, Coach. After what you saw this weekend, can you talk about what you envision with Christian Woods being implemented into this offense? And do you see the starting five including both Christian Woods and DeMarcus Cousins?
I'm not really sure what the starting lineup looks like right now. But I do have to be conscious of Cousins' minutes. I can't get him like in the 30s. Doesn't make sense for him for his long-term, our long-term goals. So I will be conscious of that. But as far as Christian Wood, I think he'll fit right in. The way that we played over these last two games where our fives were able to shoot threes and make threes or roll to the rim and draw some help. That's what he does, and that's what he's very good at. So he'll fit right in.
Jonathan Fagan.
Did you have a chance to sort of meet with and speak with James? And do you have a feeling for where he is in terms of his commitment to being part of this team?
I did. We had a good conversation, and I'm just going to leave it at that. You can ask him about his commitment and all that sort of thing. But we had a good conversation. He was locked in. He was asking good questions. He's bringing up good points. We had a good discussion. So that's it.
That's head coach Stephen Silas. And that's how he's been every day. I mean, he has the same energy. He answers he's honest with you. And then the stuff he's not going to talk about, he tells you, like, I'm gonna leave it at that, because you can't win that battle, right? The whole, what can he say about James? All you can say is what they do on the floor. And he's there to coach. And, one of the things the other day that John Wall said about him, and then we're going to wrap up, because I've gone over, John Wall said that he really liked playing for Coach Silas. Coach Silas had previously said that he loved John Wall as a person, as a basketball player, as a leader. And what John Wall said is he lets me run the floor and be who I am, but he also coaches me and corrects me so that I can continue to grow. I was like, man, what a concept, right? So that's some of what you have going on. And I'll be watching tonight. So follow me on Twitter at Kim Y. Davis so that you can see my updates. I will be following the game and doing some post-game interviews. And then the rest of the week, we'll be talking, we'll continue to talk Texans and a lot of Rockets as we get ready to head toward opening day. So with that said, thank you guys for being a part of the show. As always, let me hear from you if there's something that you'd like for me to talk about. But until next time, have a great, great week.